There's a unique kind of silence that falls over a building after dark. A quiet so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. For the night shift security guard, this is the sound of work. But sometimes, that silence is broken by a sound that doesn't belong. A footstep in an empty hall. A whisper from a vacant office. Tonight, we listen to 12 true stories from the men and women who watch over the darkness, and the things they saw watching them back. If you enjoy these stories, subscribe to Shadow Vault Stories. The night shift is just beginning. For our first set of stories, we walk the deserted corridors of places you only see during the day. Malls, offices, and hospitals that take on a terrifying new life after the sun goes down. A closed mall at night isn't just an empty place. It's an echo, a museum of forgotten trends and silenced laughter. But in a wing that's been abandoned for years, where mannequins stand watch in the dark, some echoes are newer. They watch, they wait, and as this guard discovered, sometimes they get tired of standing still. My name is Frank, and for 3 years I was the sole overnight security guard at the Northgate Galleria, a dying mall from the late 80s. Most nights, the only sounds were the hum of the ice machines in the food court and the distant groan of the building settling. It was a lonely job, but it was quiet. My main duty was to do a patrol every 2 hours, walking a massive loop through the 2 cavernous floors. The place was an echo chamber of forgotten trends, with shuttered storefronts and faded neon signs. My least favorite part of the patrol was the old department store wing. It had been abandoned for years, but for some reason the owners never cleared it out. It was a dusty tomb filled with old displays and plastic-wrapped mannequins standing like a silent, forgotten army. There was one mannequin in particular that always unnerved me. It was a male figure, positioned at the top of a broken escalator, dressed in a ridiculously outdated suit. Unlike the others, its face had a strangely realistic, almost mournful expression. Its plastic eyes seemed to follow me every time I passed. I called it Mr. Sad Suit, just a dumb joke to break the monotony. For the first year, my patrols were uneventful. The silence was my only companion. Then the small things started happening. It began subtly. One night, I passed Mr. Sad Suit on my 1 a.m. patrol. On my 3 a.m. patrol, I swear his head was turned slightly, his gaze now aimed a few degrees to the left, towards a darkened storefront. I stopped, my flashlight beam fixed on him. It was impossible. These things were heavy, bolted to their stands. I shook my head, blamed it on sleep deprivation, and moved on. A week later it happened again. This time, one of his arms was different. It had been resting at his side. Now it was bent slightly at the elbow, his plastic hand hovering just an inch higher than before. The mournful expression on his face seemed more intense. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I took out my phone and snapped a quick picture. Just to prove I'm not crazy, I muttered to the empty mall. The next night, before my first patrol, I checked the picture. Arm down. I walked the long, silent corridor to the department store wing, my heart thudding a little faster than usual. I got to the escalator and shone my light up. The mannequin was in the exact same position. Arm down. A wave of relief washed over me. I was just tired, stressed. My mind was playing tricks on me. I finished my rounds and settled back into my security office. Around 4 a.m., a motion sensor alarm blared from the west wing, the department store wing. It was the first time an alarm had gone off in over a year. Adrenaline surged through me. I grabbed my heavy mag light and raced towards the location, my footsteps echoing in the massive space. The alarm was triggered near the escalators. I arrived, panting, sweeping my light across the area. Everything was still. The dust on the floor was undisturbed. There was no sign of a break-in. I reset the alarm panel, my hands shaking slightly. Then I aimed my flashlight up the escalator to where Mr. Sad Suit stood. But he wasn't there. The stand was empty. The bolts were sheared clean off. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I backed away slowly, my light dancing wildly across the rows of other mannequins, their blank faces seeming to mock me. Where did it go? It was impossible. I turned to run back to my office and call the police. As I rounded a corner into the main concourse, my light caught something in the distance, standing in the middle of the empty food court. It was a tall, slender figure in a suit, perfectly still. It was him. He was just standing there, facing away from me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He had moved over 200 yards in a matter of minutes without making a sound. Slowly, as if it sensed I was there, the mannequin began to turn its head. I didn't wait to see its face. I ran. I burst out of the emergency exit and didn't stop running until I was in my car, speeding away. I never went back. I just left my job, my final paycheck, everything. Sometimes late at night, I drive by the old Northgate Galleria. It's completely dark now, slated for demolition. But on a clear night, if I look through the dusty glass doors of the main entrance, I can almost see a tall, lonely figure in a suit, standing silently in the food court, waiting for the next person to walk the halls alone. The quiet of a children's hospital at night is a profound, almost sacred thing. But the silence is never truly empty. It's filled with untold stories and the pain that lingers in the walls. Some sounds, like the bounce of a rubber ball in a deserted playroom, don't come from the living, and they aren't an echo of the past. They're an invitation to play. I worked the night shift at St. Jude's Children's Hospital for about 6 months. Not as a doctor or a nurse, but as a security guard. It was a new wing, state-of-the-art, and mostly empty at night, except for the ER and the pediatric intensive care unit. My job was to patrol the quiet floors, making sure everything was secure. The 5th floor was the creepiest. It was the long-term care ward, a place for kids who were very, very sick. It was always kept dim and silent, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. The nurses were amazing, but there was a sadness that hung in the air, a history of pain that you could feel in the walls. My nights were usually the same. Walk the halls, check the doors, listen to the hum of the machines. The silence became normal. Until one Tuesday night. I was doing my 2 a.m. walkthrough of the 5th floor. The hallway was a long, straight line with rooms on either side. The nurses' station at the far end was empty, as they were on their break. The only sound was the squeak of my own shoes on the polished linoleum. Then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound from the other end of the hall. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a small rubber ball being bounced. I stopped, straining my ears. The sound stopped too. I dismissed it. An ice machine, a piece of equipment malfunctioning. This hospital was full of strange noises. I continued my patrol. A few minutes later, I heard it again, a little closer this time. Thump, 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 thump. It was definitely a ball. I walked towards the sound, my hand resting on my radio out of habit. It seemed to be coming from the playroom, a glass-walled room in the middle of the hallway. The lights were off inside, the colorful toys and murals cast in deep shadow. As I got closer, the bouncing stopped again. I peered through the glass. The room was still. A large red ball sat perfectly motionless in the center of the floor. There was no one there. A chill crawled up my spine. I kept walking, telling myself I was just tired. I finished my round and headed back to the security desk in the lobby. About an hour later, the call light for room 512 lit up on my panel. 512 was at the far end of the 5th floor hall. I sighed, picked up the radio, and headed for the elevator. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It was heavier than before. I walked down the hall, my footsteps feeling unnaturally loud. As I passed the playroom, I glanced inside. The red ball was gone. My blood ran cold. I quickened my pace, my eyes fixed on the door to room 512. The call light above it was still illuminated. I knocked softly. "Security," I said. "Is everything okay?" There was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Hospital policy dictated I had to enter if a call light wasn't answered. I swiped my key card and the door clicked open. I pushed it open slowly. The room was dark, the only light coming from the hallway. The bed was empty and perfectly made. The room was vacant. It hadn't been assigned a patient in weeks. As I stood there, completely bewildered, I heard it again. Thump, thump, right behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. The hallway was empty. But at my feet, sitting innocently on the floor, was the red ball. It hadn't been there a second ago. I stared at it, paralyzed with a fear so profound it felt like ice in my veins. Then, from inside the dark room I had just opened, I heard a child's giggle. It was a soft, airy sound, full of innocence, and it was the most terrifying thing I have ever heard. I didn't enter the room. I didn't touch the ball. I backed away down the hall, never taking my eyes off that open doorway, and I didn't stop until I was outside in the cool night air. I quit the next morning. I still have nightmares about that giggle. I know that hospital is a place of healing, but some of its older residents never truly leave the playroom. They just want someone to play with. For a security guard, the wall of monitors is a window into every empty, silent corner of a building. It's a position of power, of omniscience. But that sense of control shatters when you realize one of those windows isn't a one-way street. What do you do when something or someone on the other side of the glass starts looking back at you? For a couple of years, I had what I thought was the easiest job in the world. I was the overnight guard for a new, mostly empty corporate high-rise downtown. My office was a state-of-the-art security room in the basement, with a wall of 24 monitors showing every conceivable angle of the building. My job was to sit there for 8 hours and make sure no one broke in. No one ever did. The building was a ghost town from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. The only company I had was the silent, black and white figures of myself on the screens as I did my one and only patrol at midnight. The strangeness started on a Thursday. I was sitting back in my chair, half watching the monitors, half reading a book. My eyes drifted to monitor 12, which showed the empty, sterile lobby of the 14th floor. The 14th floor was completely vacant, just a concrete shell waiting for a tenant who never came. And standing in the middle of the lobby was a man. He was just standing there, his back to the camera. He was wearing clothes just like mine, a dark blue security uniform. I sat up straight, my heart kicking into gear. I did a quick scan of all the other monitors. Every other hallway, every entrance, every elevator was empty. How did he get up there? I picked up the radio. "This is security, is there anyone on the 14th floor?" I asked, knowing the question was absurd. The radio hissed with static. No response. I zoomed the camera on monitor 12, but the resolution was too grainy to make out any details. It was just a man in my uniform standing perfectly still. My training kicked in. I had to go up and confront him. I locked the security office, my mind racing. Maybe it was a prank? A manager testing me? I took the service elevator up to the 14th floor, my hand shaking slightly as I pressed the button. The elevator doors opened to a dark, silent lobby. The air was cold and smelled of concrete dust. I turned on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The floor was empty. There was no one there. I did a full sweep of the entire floor, checking every corner, every unfinished office space. Nothing. Just dust and echoes. I stood in the exact spot where I had seen the man on the monitor. There was nothing there. Confused and unnerved, I headed back to the elevator, chalking it up to a bizarre glitch, a trick of the light. When I got back to the security office, I stared at monitor 12. The lobby on the 14th floor was empty. I let out a long breath. It had to be a glitch. I sat down, my adrenaline slowly fading. I kept my eyes glued to that monitor for the rest of the night. Nothing happened. The next night I was on edge. Every flicker on the screens made me jump. Midnight came and went. The building was silent. Just as I was starting to relax, around 3:33 a.m., I saw it again. Monitor 12. He was back, standing in the same spot. But this time he was facing the camera. I couldn't make out his face. It was just a pale, blurry oval in the grainy black and white feed. But I could feel his gaze even through the screen. He was watching me. And then he did something that made the blood freeze in my veins. He slowly lifted his hand and waved. A small, deliberate wave directly at the camera. Directly at me. I didn't go up there this time. I just sat there, frozen in my chair, staring back at the silent, waving figure on the screen. He stood there, waving for almost an hour. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. The screen showed an empty lobby once more. I quit the next day. I couldn't explain what I saw, and I knew no one would believe me. I sometimes wonder about the guard who replaced me. I wonder if he ever sees the man on monitor 12. I have a theory I can't shake. The building was new, built on the site of an old hotel that had burned down decades ago. They say the night manager never made it out. I think he's still working his shift, still making his rounds. And sometimes he just wants to let the new guy know that he's not really alone in that building. A distribution warehouse at night is a cathedral of silence, a labyrinth of aisles filled with dormant, lifeless products. Every item is cataloged, every pallet is in its place. The order is absolute. So when a single box that shouldn't be there appears out of thin air, you don't just question logistics. You start to question reality. It wasn't a delivery, it was an arrival. Before I got into IT, I paid the bills by working as an overnight guard at a massive distribution warehouse on the outskirts of the city. We're talking a place the size of 3 football fields, filled with towering metal shelves that went up 60 feet into the darkness. During the day, it was a hive of activity. At night, it was the quietest, loneliest place on earth. My job was simple. Sit in a small office at the front, watch the cameras, and do one full patrol at 2 a.m. The patrol was the worst part. The sheer scale of the place in the dark was humbling. The aisles were canyons of shadow, and the silence was so complete that the hum of the emergency lights felt like a scream. The company stored everything you could imagine: electronics, clothing, non-perishable food. My first few months were mind-numbingly boring. Nothing ever happened. The only excitement was a raccoon that kept figuring out how to get into the dumpsters. Then came a night in late November. It was cold and a storm was raging outside. The rain was hammering against the metal roof, which actually made me feel a little less alone. I was in my office watching the camera feeds when I noticed something odd on camera 17, which covered the far northeast corner of the warehouse. A single box about the size of a microwave was sitting on the floor in the middle of the aisle. I knew for a fact it wasn't there before. The day crew was meticulous. Every aisle was cleared before they left. I zoomed in. It was a plain brown cardboard box with no markings. I rewound the footage. At 10:43 p.m. the aisle was empty. At 10:44 p.m. the box was just there. It didn't fall. No one brought it. The footage didn't glitch. It just appeared between one frame and the next. I felt a weird prickle on the back of my neck. I told myself it was a camera bug, a weird digital artifact. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It was almost 2 a.m., time for my patrol. I almost decided to skip it, but the thought of getting fired was scarier than a phantom box. I grabbed my flashlight and started my long walk. The warehouse felt different tonight. The sound of the rain was deafening, but underneath it, the silence felt heavier, more watchful. I made my way towards the northeast corner, my footsteps echoing. I turned down the aisle for camera 17 and my heart stopped. The box was there. Exactly where I had seen it on the monitor. It was real. I approached it cautiously, my flashlight beam trained on it. It was just a box. I nudged it with my foot. It was heavy, solid. I took a deep breath, trying to be rational. Maybe someone had left it as a prank. I decided to move it out of the aisle and deal with it in the morning. I bent down to pick it up. The moment my fingers touched the cardboard, I heard a sound. A loud, scraping sound from the other end of the aisle. I snapped my head up, shining my light into the darkness. Nothing. But I knew what I had heard. It was the sound of a wooden pallet loaded with goods being dragged across the concrete floor. Something that would take a forklift or 3 strong men to move. I backed away from the box, my heart hammering. Then I heard it again from an adjacent aisle. A heavy thud, followed by the sound of tearing cardboard. I started to run. Not a jog, a full-on sprint back towards my office. As I ran, a cacophony of sounds erupted around me. The beeping of a forklift that I knew was turned off. The crash of a shelf of goods hitting the floor. The screech of metal on concrete. It was like the entire warehouse was coming to life, an invisible, chaotic crew rearranging the entire place. I didn't look back. I threw myself into the security office and slammed the heavy door, locking the deadbolt. I scrambled over to the monitors. The warehouse was in chaos. Pallets were being moved. Boxes were being thrown from the top shelves. The place was being destroyed. But on every single camera there was no one there. The forklifts were moving on their own. The boxes were flying through the air as if thrown by an invisible giant. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, for almost an hour. Then, as suddenly as it began, it all stopped. The warehouse was silent again except for the rain. I stayed locked in that office until the sun came up and the morning crew arrived. I didn't even try to explain the utter devastation they found. I just collected my things and walked out. They probably thought I had a psychotic episode and did it myself. I don't care. I know what I saw. I don't know what was in that first box that appeared in the aisle, but I think I know what happened. It wasn't a delivery. It was an arrival. And whatever came in that box, it did not like the way the place was organized. Working security in a museum is a job of watching the dead, of walking among the bones of ancient creatures and the tombs of forgotten kings. The rule is simple. As long as they stay behind the glass and inside their stone coffins, everything is fine. This story is about the night one of the oldest residents decided he no longer wanted to follow the rules. I used to be a history major with a romantic notion of spending my nights surrounded by ancient artifacts. So, when the city's Museum of Natural and Ancient History needed an overnight guard, I jumped at the chance. The reality was less romantic and more unsettling. After the last employee leaves and the lights dim to their nighttime low, a museum becomes a mausoleum. You're walking through halls filled with the dead, taxidermied animals, dinosaur skeletons, and the preserved remains of ancient cultures. And you realize you're the only living thing for acres. My patrol route was long and specific, designed to cover every exhibit. The creepiest part was always the echoes of the Nile wing. This section was a new addition, a collection of artifacts from a recently discovered, lesser-known tomb. The centerpiece was the sarcophagus of a priest named Nebhather. It was an imposing stone coffin, covered in hieroglyphs, and unlike the gold-plated ones of the pharaohs, this one was dark, plain, and gave off a palpable sense of cold. According to the exhibit's plaque, the hieroglyphs weren't prayers to the gods, but warnings. Curses against anyone who disturbed his rest. For the first few weeks, Nebhather was just another creepy part of the job. I'd pass his sarcophagus, shine my light on the stern, carved face and move on. Then one night I noticed his arms. The sarcophagus lid depicted the priest in the classic pose, arms crossed over his chest, hands clutching an ankh and a staff. On my 11 p.m. round, I noted that his carved left hand was clutching the ankh. On my 1 a.m. round, I stopped and stared, my blood turning to ice. His left hand was now empty, and his right hand was clutching the ankh. I stood there for a full 10 minutes trying to rationalize it. A trick of the light? A faulty memory? I took a photo with my phone for proof, the flash startlingly bright in the darkness. I checked the photo. Right hand holding the ankh. I resolved to check it again on my next round. 2 hours later, my hands were sweating as I approached the echoes of the Nile wing. The silence in the museum felt heavier, more expectant. I entered the exhibit hall, my flashlight beam shaking. I shone it on the sarcophagus. I looked at the hands. The ankh was back in the left hand. I looked at the photo on my phone. Right hand? I looked back at the coffin. Left hand. I felt a wave of dizziness. This was impossible. It wasn't just a faulty memory. Something was happening. I backed out of the hall, my heart pounding. I decided to avoid that wing for the rest of the night, watching it from the security cameras instead. On the grainy feed, the sarcophagus remained perfectly still. The next night, I dreaded my patrol. I had to check the wing, it was part of my job. I stood at the entrance to the Nile exhibit, took a deep breath and walked in. I shone my light on the sarcophagus. The hands were in their original position, left hand holding the ankh. But something else was different. The head. The carved stone head of the priest, which had always stared straight up at the ceiling, was now turned ever so slightly, its empty stone eyes aimed directly at the doorway where I stood. I didn't even scream. A cold, quiet terror just filled me up. I knew I was there. I knew I was watching. I started backing away, my eyes locked on the sarcophagus. As I moved, the beam of my flashlight caught something on the floor. A thin line of sand, trickling from the seam of the heavy stone lid, forming a small growing pile on the polished floor. It was the sand of a tomb that had been sealed for 3,000 years. And it was coming out. I quit that job on the spot. I radioed my supervisor, said I was sick, and walked out, leaving the doors unlocked behind me. I read in the local paper a few weeks later that the Echoes of the Nile exhibit was temporarily closed to the public due to unexpected structural degradation of some of the artifacts. They said the main sarcophagus had developed a large, inexplicable crack down the center. I know it wasn't degradation. It was the sound of something old and patient, finally pushing the door open from the inside. The rhythmic sound of a janitor's broom in an empty elementary school is a familiar, almost comforting noise. It's the sound of work being done, of order being restored. But that comfort turns to absolute dread when you know for a fact that you watched the only janitor on site go home 2 hours ago. For a winter, I worked as a night security guard at an old elementary school. It was a temporary gig while the regular guy recovered from surgery. The school was built in the 1950s, a sprawling single-story building with long, echoing hallways and the faint, lingering smell of chalk dust and floor wax. At night, the place was deeply unsettling. The small chairs and colorful drawings on the walls just made the emptiness feel more profound. My job consisted of walking the perimeter and then doing an interior patrol every hour, making sure all the classroom doors were locked. The school had one other person there at night, Mr. Gable, the elderly janitor. He was a quiet, stooped man who had worked at the school for over 40 years. He'd usually be done with his work by 10 p.m., and we'd nod to each other as he left for the night. After he was gone, I was completely alone, or so I thought. About a week into the job, I was doing my 11 p.m. patrol. The school was dead silent. As I walked down the main hallway, I heard a faint rhythmic sound from a corridor up ahead. Swish, scrape, swish, scrape. It was the sound of a push broom on the tile floor. I figured it was just Mr. Gable working late. I walked towards the sound, ready to give him a friendly wave. I turned the corner. The hallway was empty. The sound stopped. I stood there for a moment, confused. The hallway was dimly lit by the emergency lights, and there was no one there. "Mr. Gable?" I called out. My voice echoed. No answer. I walked the length of the corridor, checking the doors. All locked. I shook my head. The building's old heating system probably made a similar noise. The next night the same thing happened. Around 11:30 p.m. I heard the sweeping. Swish, scrape. This time it sounded like it was coming from inside one of the classrooms. I checked my log. Classroom 104. I walked up to the door and listened. The sound was clear, right on the other side. I tried the handle. Locked just as I had left it. I peered through the small, wire-reinforced window in the door. The classroom was dark. I couldn't see anything moving, but I could still hear the sweeping, soft and methodical. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. This wasn't the heating system. I called my supervisor on the radio. He laughed. "Oh, that's just old Gable," he said. "He's probably just finishing up. Don't worry about it." "But he left 2 hours ago," I insisted. "I saw him leave." There was a long pause on the radio. "Kid, Gable has been working there longer than you've been alive. The man probably has his own set of keys to a secret janitor's closet we don't even know about. As long as the place is clean in the morning, I don't care if he sleeps there." He sounded annoyed, so I dropped it, but I knew something was wrong. For the rest of the week, I heard the sweeping every night, always from a locked room, always stopping when I got too close. I started to dread my patrols. The sound was starting to feel less like someone cleaning and more like someone pacing, waiting. On my last night on the job, a Friday, I was determined to figure it out. At 10 p.m., I watched Mr. Gable lock up his supply closet, wave goodbye, and walk out to his car. I watched him drive away. The school was now mine. At midnight, the sweeping started. Swish, scrape. It was coming from the gymnasium at the far end of the school. My heart pounded as I walked the long, dark hallway towards the gym. The double doors were chained and padlocked from the outside. My padlock. But the sound was loud and clear from within, echoing in the vast, empty space. I stood there listening for a long time. The sweeping never stopped. It just went on and on for hours. I didn't finish my patrol that night. I just sat in my small office at the front, listening to the phantom janitor who never left. The regular guard was due back on Monday. As I was packing up my things at the end of my shift, I did one last walkthrough of the main hall. Lying on the floor directly in front of the main office was a single old-fashioned brass key. It was attached to a worn leather fob with the name Gable faintly embossed on it. It was the key to his main supply closet, the one he had locked before he left, the one he would have needed to get back in. He had never come back for it. A horrifying realization dawned on me. My supervisor was right. Mr. Gable had been working at that school longer than I had been alive. He just wasn't alive anymore. He was just still trying to finish his shift. You've made it through the first half of the shift, but the darkest hours are still ahead. The next 6 stories come from places even more isolated, where help is too far away, and the things that go bump in the night aren't just trying to scare you, they're trying to get in. Before we continue, leave a like and comment which story has unsettled you the most so far. It lets us know which nightmares to unlock next. Now back to the darkness. The basement of a medical school is a place of cold logic and hard facts. But the stainless steel door to the cadaver storage is a border. It's the final stop. What's on the other side is matter, no longer life. And matter doesn't make noise. Matter doesn't move. And most of all, cold matter doesn't leave a fresh, wet handprint from the inside of the door. I took a night security job at the university's medical science building to pay for my tuition. It was a modern facility, all glass and steel, and at night, it was as silent as a tomb, which, in hindsight, was pretty fitting. My patrol included all 6 floors, but the one that got under my skin was B2, the basement. That's where the anatomy labs were. And next to the labs was a stainless steel door with a single ominous label, cadaver storage. My first few weeks were quiet. The only sounds in the basement were the loud hum of the ventilation and the deeper thrum of the refrigeration units behind that steel door. It was a constant mechanical noise that I got used to. The first incident was small. I was doing my 3 a.m. patrol, walking down the brightly lit, sterile hallway of the basement. As I passed the cadaver storage, I heard a sound that broke the rhythm of the humming. A single heavy thud. It sounded like it came from inside. I stopped listening. There was only the hum of the machines. I told myself it was just the cooling system, a compressor kicking on or something. These places made all sorts of noises. I logged it as unusual noise from refrigeration and moved on. The next week it happened again. This time it was a scraping sound. A long, slow scrape of metal on metal. It lasted for about 3 seconds and then stopped. It sounded exactly like one of the heavy rolling body trays inside being moved. But it couldn't be. Those things were behind a locked, heavy door. I started to get spooked. I'd linger by the security cameras for that hallway, watching the footage, hoping to see something that would explain it. A maintenance worker, maybe. But there was never anyone there. The hallway was always empty. The noises became more frequent. A thud here, a scrape there. Always stopping the moment I got close. My supervisor told me I was imagining things, that the place was getting to me. He was probably right. I was a student, tired and stressed. It was easy to let your mind play tricks on you in a place like that. I had almost convinced myself it was all in my head. Until my last night on the job. A thick fog had rolled in outside, pressing against the basement level windows. It made the whole floor feel even more isolated, more claustrophobic. I was dreading my final patrol of the basement. As I approached the cadaver storage, the hallway felt colder than usual. The humming of the refrigeration units seemed louder, more agitated. I got to the stainless steel door, my flashlight in hand, ready to just check the lock and get out of there as fast as I could. And then I saw it. On the polished, cold surface of the steel door, there was a handprint. It was on the outside of the door, facing me. It was a perfect, 5-fingered handprint, but it wasn't made of dust or dirt. It was wet. A clear, greasy condensation print, as if someone with a very, very cold hand had just pressed it against the door from the inside out, trying to push their way through. I stared at it, my heart stopping in my chest. I could see the individual ridges of the fingerprints. It was the handprint of a large man. And from the bottom of the palm, a single small trickle of condensation was running down the steel, as if the hand had been removed only seconds ago. I didn't hear a thud. I didn't hear a scrape. All I could hear was the frantic hum of the machinery and the blood pounding in my ears. I knew with a certainty that buckled my knees, that whatever was inside that cold room was aware of me. It wasn't just making noise anymore. It was reaching. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off that handprint. I walked backwards all the way to the elevator, my radio forgotten, my training gone. I didn't even go back to the security office. I just got in my car and drove. I dropped out of that university the next semester. I couldn't stand the thought of walking past that building again. I don't know what was in there, but I know it was cold and I know it wanted out. And I'm terrified that one night, it will find the door unlocked. A self-storage facility is a city of the forgotten, hundreds of metal doors hiding lives on pause. For a night guard, the rule is simple: keep the doors locked. But when one unit starts unlocking itself, night after night, and the childish melody of a music box begins to echo through the metal halls, you realize something inside is desperately trying to tell its story. I worked the graveyard shift at a massive self-storage facility for a year. It was a sprawling maze of identical metal corridors and roll-up doors. Hundreds of them. Each one a little metal box hiding someone's life, someone's secrets. My job was to do 2 patrols a night, a long, lonely walk to make sure every unit was locked and secure. Was an easy gig. The only sounds were the buzz of the fluorescent lights and the clanging echo of my own footsteps. Most of the time, nothing happened. But every now and then you'd get a weird one. Unit 237 was the weird one. It started about a month into the job. I was on my first patrol around 11 p.m. I got to Unit 237 and found the latch was up, the lock hanging loose. I sighed, assuming the owner had just forgotten to lock it properly. I pulled the heavy metal door down, slid the latch into place and secured it with the padlock. I made a note in my log and moved on. On my second patrol around 4 a.m. I came back down that same corridor. Unit 237 was unlocked again. The exact same way. Latch up, padlock hanging. A chill went down my spine. I knew I had locked it. I locked it myself. I secured it again, this time giving the lock an extra hard tug to make sure it was set. This became a bizarre ritual. Every single night, on both of my patrols, Unit 237 would be unlocked. I'd lock it at 11 p.m., and it would be unlocked again at 4 a.m. I checked the security footage. Nothing. The camera at the end of the hall showed no one entering or leaving the corridor. I checked the access logs. The owner of Unit 237 hadn't been to the facility in over 6 months. I told my manager and he just shrugged. "Is anything missing?" he asked. I told him no. "Then don't worry about it. Just lock it and log it." It was unnerving, but it was my job. So I just kept locking it. One night, I got to the corridor for my 4 a.m. patrol. I was dreading it as usual. As I approached Unit 237, I heard something. A faint, tinkling sound. It was a music box. A simple, childish melody, playing slowly as if it was winding down. It was coming from inside Unit 237, the unit that was once again unlocked. I stood there, frozen, just listening. The music was beautiful, but in that cold, silent metal hallway, it was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. The music slowly faded, and the final note hung in the air before silence returned. Against my better judgment, I had to know what was inside. My hands shaking, I lifted the heavy roll-up door. The metal screeched, the sound deafeningly loud. I shone my flashlight inside. The unit was completely empty. Bare concrete floor, bare metal walls. Nothing. Except for one small object in the very back corner. It was an old, ornate wooden music box. I walked in, my light fixed on it. It was closed. It wasn't playing. I nudged it with my boot. Silence. I felt a surge of adrenaline and fear. I slammed the roll-up door shut, locked the unit with a loud clang, and practically ran back to my office. I sat there, staring at the monitors, my heart pounding. I was ready to quit. About an hour later, just as the sky was starting to turn gray, I heard it again. Faintly, through the speaker in my office connected to the hallway microphones. The tinkling sound of a music box. But it wasn't coming from Unit 237. I switched the camera feeds. The sound was coming from the next corridor over. From a unit I had checked and found secure not 2 hours earlier. Unit 337. And on the monitor I could see it clearly. The latch was up. The padlock was hanging loose. I didn't go to investigate. I just sat in my chair and waited for my shift to end. I don't know what's in those units. I don't know who or what is playing that music, but I know it's moving, and I think it's looking for a way out. On a skyscraper construction site, the wind howls through the steel beams, making the building groan as if it's alive. A night guard learns to ignore those sounds, but some noises aren't the wind. A rhythmic hammering, a heavy footstep on steel. It's the sound of a man who refused to clock out, even after the job cost him his life. For 6 months, I was a security guard at a skyscraper construction site in the heart of the city. We're talking a massive 50-story skeleton of steel and concrete, wrapped in black netting open to the wind. My job was to patrol the ground floor and make sure no kids or trespassers got in. It was an eerie place at night. The wind would howl through the empty floors, making the whole structure moan like a living thing. The sounds were constant. The flapping of tarps, the clanging of loose chains, the screech of metal on metal. You learn to ignore them. My first few weeks were uneventful. Just me, the wind, and the rats. Then I started hearing a new sound. It was different from the random noises of the site. It was rhythmic, a hammering sound. It was always faint, coming from way up, from the top floors that were just open steel beams. I'd hear it around 3 a.m. A steady, deliberate bang, 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 like someone was methodically hammering a nail. The first few times I tried to find the source. I'd go up a few floors in the rickety construction elevator, but the sound would always stop the moment I got out. The upper floors were a dark, windy maze of rebar and scaffolding. There was never anyone there. I told the day shift supervisor about it. He just laughed. "It's the wind, kid. That building sings at night. You'll get used to it." I tried to believe him. But the sound wasn't random like the wind. It was intentional. Some nights it wasn't hammering. It was a rhythmic scraping, like someone dragging a heavy toolbox across a concrete floor. I started to dread the hours after midnight. I'd sit in my little guard shack, listening, the sounds from above making the hair on my arms stand up. One night, the hammering was louder than ever. It was a clear, windless night, so I couldn't blame it on the weather. I was fed up. I had to know what it was. I got in the elevator and went all the way up to the 45th floor, the highest the elevator could go. The final 5 floors were just open steel, accessible only by temporary ladders. As I stepped out, the city lights spread out below me like a blanket of stars. The air was cold and thin. The hammering had stopped. I stood there listening. The only sound was the faint hum of the city. I was about to head back down when I heard a different sound. A footstep. A single heavy boot stepping on a steel beam right above my head. Then another. Someone was walking around on the 46th or 47th floor. "This is security," I yelled, my voice sounding thin in the open air. "You need to come down now." The footsteps stopped. There was a long, tense silence. Then I saw something. A shadow detached from the main structure of the building above me. A human-shaped silhouette against the night sky. It wasn't falling fast. It was falling slowly, almost gracefully, tumbling end over end without a sound. I watched, my blood frozen, as the silhouette fell past my floor, past the 40th, the 30th, all the way down into the darkness of the street below. I waited for the sound, the crash, the sirens, but there was nothing. Just the endless, quiet hum of the city. I frantically radioed it in. "Someone just fell from the top of the building. West side." My supervisor was on site in minutes. We searched the street, the perimeter, everywhere. There was no body. No sign of impact. Nothing. My supervisor pulled me aside, his face grim. "Look," he said, his voice low. "I didn't want to tell you this. We had an accident here about 2 months ago. A steel worker named Marco. He fell from the 47th floor. It happened at night, just after his shift ended. We We never really figured out why he was still up there. He looked up at the dark, skeletal tower. Some of the day guys say they still hear him, finishing his shift. I didn't go back up in that elevator. I walked off the site that night and never returned. I know what I saw. It wasn't the wind. It was a man who loved his job so much he never clocked out. He's still up there, hammering away, forever trying to finish a job that already cost him his life. The basement archives of an old library hold the city's dustiest secrets. But when one particular book, a book about a great fire that destroyed the original library on that very spot, keeps appearing on the floor, open to the same page night after night, you learn a valuable lesson. Some librarians are very protective of their collection, especially the ones who died with it. My dream job was to be a librarian. The reality was being a night guard at the city's central library, a massive old Carnegie building with marble floors and ceilings so high your voice would echo for seconds. After closing, the place transformed. The silence was the main thing. A deep, heavy quiet that felt ancient. My patrol route took me through every section, from the bright, modern children's wing to my least favorite place, the basement archives. The archives were a labyrinth of rolling metal shelves, the kind you had to turn a big crank to move. The air down there was cold and smelled of old paper and dust, and the lights were always flickering. The incident started in the archives in the local history section. Every night around 1 a.m. I'd do my sweep, and every night I'd find the same thing. A single, heavy, leather-bound book lying on the floor in the middle of the aisle. It was always the same book, A History of the Great Fire of 1889, and it was always open to the same page. Chapter 7, which detailed the complete destruction of the city's first library, the one that had stood on this exact spot. The first few times I just picked it up, put it back on the shelf, and thought nothing of it. Maybe a late working librarian had forgotten it. But it kept happening. Every single night. Same book, same aisle, same open page. I started to get unnerved. I made a point of making sure the book was secure on its shelf, even pushing other books up against it. The next night it would be on the floor again. I checked the security logs. I was the only person with access to the archives after 9 p.m. The cameras in the basement were old and grainy, but they showed the same thing every night. Me walking down the aisle, picking up the book, and then nothing until I came back the next night. The book just appeared on the floor between my patrols. One night, I decided to try something different. I picked up the book, but instead of putting it back, I took it with me. I locked it in my security desk upstairs. I felt a weird sense of triumph. The rest of the night was quiet. As I was doing my final patrol around 5 a.m., I walked past the main reading room. All the lights were off, but in the far corner, I saw a flicker of light like a candle. I crept closer, my heart starting to pound. Sitting at one of the heavy oak tables was the silhouette of a man. He was hunched over a book, and the light seemed to be coming from the pages themselves. He was wearing old-fashioned clothes, a dark coat and a hat, something out of a history book. He seemed completely absorbed, his head nodding as he read. "Sir," I said, my voice trembling, "the library is closed." The man didn't look up. He just slowly raised one hand and turned a page. The page made no sound. A cold dread filled me. I shone my flashlight at him. The beam passed right through him, illuminating the chair and the wall behind him as if he wasn't there at all. He was an apparition made of shadow and memory. He slowly looked up, his face just a blur of darkness, but I could feel his gaze. It wasn't angry. It was annoyed, like I had interrupted his reading. And then he just faded away, dissolving into the darkness. I stood there, shaking, my flashlight beam dancing on the empty chair. On the table where he had been sitting was a single leather-bound book. It was the book I had locked in my desk. A History of the Great Fire of 1889. It was open to chapter 7. I walked over to it, my legs feeling like lead. The pages felt warm to the touch. I quit the next day. I think I know who that man was. The old library's head librarian, a man named Alastair Finch, was famously dedicated. He refused to leave the building during the Great Fire, trying to save the books. His last words, according to the history I had been forced to read, were, "The collection must be preserved." I think he's still on the job. And he gets very annoyed when you misplace one of his books. A TV studio at night is a place of ghosts, the ghosts of broadcasts past. But when a silent black and white news report from 1968 starts appearing on your monitor every night, at the exact same time, showing the last seconds of an anchorwoman's life, you realize you're not watching a recording. You're receiving a message, and maybe a warning. I'm a bit of a night owl, so when a job opened up for overnight security at the local TV news station, I took it. It was a surprisingly modern building, but at 2 a.m., it was a ghost town. My post was the master control room, a dark, circular room dominated by a massive wall of monitors. Most of them were just black screens, but a few showed static test patterns, or a live feed of the empty news desk, eerily lit by a single ghost light. My job was to watch for any unauthorized access and do a walkthrough every hour. Most nights, it was just me and the low hum of 100 sleeping machines. The weirdness started with Studio 3. It was one of the older, smaller studios down a back hallway, mostly used for storage now. The camera feed for Studio 3 on my monitor wall was supposed to be black, just like all the other inactive studios. But one night it flickered on. The screen filled with grainy black and white footage. It looked like an old news broadcast from the 60s. A single anchor woman with a classic beehive hairstyle was sitting at a desk, looking directly into the camera. There was no sound, just the silent, flickering image. She wasn't moving, just staring, her expression grim. After about 10 seconds, the screen went black again. I logged it as a technical fault. Probably some old wiring or a cross signal. But it happened again the next night. Same time, around 3:15 a.m. The screen for Studio 3 flickered on. The same silent, black and white anchor woman staring. This time, her mouth was slightly open as if she was in the middle of a sentence. It lasted for 10 seconds, then blackness. I started to get a creepy feeling about it. I went down to check Studio 3. It was empty, cold, and smelled of dust and old broadcasting equipment. The cameras were covered in tarps. Nothing was powered on. The nightly broadcast became my own private, terrifying ritual. Every night at 3:15 a.m. she would appear. Each time her expression was slightly different. One night, her eyes were wide with what looked like fear. The next, she seemed to be pleading. It was always silent, always 10 seconds long. I became obsessed. I researched the station's history. I found out that back in 1968, an anchor woman named Caroline Hayes had suffered a sudden fatal brain aneurysm live on air during the late-night news report. It happened in Studio 3. Knowing that made everything worse. I wasn't watching a ghost broadcast. I was watching the last 10 seconds of a woman's life, replaying itself every night. I told myself I should quit, that this was ghoulish. But I couldn't. I had to see it through. On the anniversary of her death, a cold, rainy night in October, I was staring at the black screen for Studio 3, my heart pounding. 3:15 a.m. The screen flickered on. It was her. But this time it was different. The footage was clearer. And she was moving. She looked frantic. She was looking at something off camera, her face a mask of pure terror. She opened her mouth, not to speak, but in a silent scream. She looked back at the camera, her eyes locking onto mine. And then she did something that made my soul turn to ice. She slowly lifted her hand, her fingers trembling, and she pointed. not at something in her studio. She was pointing out of the screen. She was pointing directly at me. As she pointed, her mouth formed a single silent word. A word I could read perfectly on her lips. Run. The screen went black. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my coat and ran out of that building. I didn't even clock out. Some say she's a ghost haunting the studio where she died. I don't think so. I think she's a warning. I think she can see something standing in that dark control room with the guard, and she's just trying to tell him to get out before it's too late. In a meatpacking plant, the conveyor belts and stainless steel hooks are supposed to be still and empty at night. When the entire system powers on by itself, you might blame a short circuit. It's a logical explanation, but that logic dissolves when you look up and see that one of those hooks isn't empty, and whatever is hanging from it is starting to move. My last job as a night guard was at a meatpacking plant. I only lasted a week. I should have known better. The place was a temple of death even during the day. At night, it was a scene from a horror movie. Long, sterile corridors, the constant drip of water, and the faint, sweet, coppery smell of blood that never went away. My patrol route took me through the whole process in reverse, from the refrigerated loading docks all the way back to the kill floor. The worst part was the processing room, a vast, cold chamber filled with a network of overhead conveyor belts and hundreds of huge, stainless steel hooks, hanging from chains like a metallic forest. They were all supposed to be empty and motionless at night. My first few nights were quiet. Just the hum of the giant freezers and the unsettling echoes. I'd walk my route, trying not to look at the dark stains on the concrete floor. On the fourth night, I was in the main security office watching the cameras. It was just after 2 a.m. And then I heard it. A low, grinding sound followed by a rhythmic clanking. It was the sound of the main conveyor system starting up. I sat bolt upright. That was impossible. The entire system was powered down from a master control panel at the other end of the plant. I radioed my supervisor, who was off-site. He told me it was probably a short circuit and that I needed to go and hit the emergency kill switch next to the panel. I didn't want to go. The thought of walking through that dark plant towards a machine that had started on its own was terrifying. But it was my job. I grabbed my flashlight and started the long walk, my footsteps echoing unnervingly. The clanking grew louder as I approached the processing room. I pushed open the heavy double doors. The room was freezing, my breath pluming in the air. The conveyor system was moving. The long chain snaked its way through the ceiling, the empty hooks clanking and swaying as they passed above me. The sound was deafening. I made my way along the catwalk towards the master control panel at the far end of the room. I kept my eyes on the panel, trying to ignore the hundreds of swinging hooks passing over my head. I was about halfway there when a strange rhythmic drip, 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 broke through the mechanical noise. It was a heavy, thick sound. I stopped, my blood running cold. I looked up. One of the hooks passing directly above me wasn't empty. There was something hanging from it. It was large and dark, wrapped in what looked like heavy black plastic. It was swaying with the motion of the chain, and as it swayed, a thick, dark liquid was dripping from the bottom, splattering on the floor below. My first thought was that the day crew had forgotten a side of beef, that it had been wrapped for transport. But it was the wrong shape. It was too long, too slender, and it was hanging in a way that felt wrong. As it passed over me, I shone my flashlight beam up at it. The plastic was old and torn in places. Through one of the tears, I saw something pale. It wasn't meat. It looked like skin. I stumbled back, a scream catching in my throat. I had to get out of there. I turned to run, but just as I did, the entire conveyor system groaned and came to a sudden, screeching halt. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. I was frozen, standing on the catwalk, the thing in the plastic bag hanging motionless just a few feet ahead of me. And then it moved. It wasn't swaying. It twisted, slowly, as if the thing inside was turning to look at me. The plastic rustled. From the top of the bundle, a shape began to emerge from the shadows, a shape that looked horribly like a human head. It slowly turned in my direction. I didn't see a face. I just saw 2 points of light in the darkness, reflecting my flashlight beam. I didn't wait to see more. I jumped from the catwalk, fell the 5 feet to the floor, and ran. I ran out of that plant and never looked back. I don't know what was hanging on that hook, but I know it wasn't an animal. And I know the plant had a high turnover rate for its workers. They'd always say people just quit and moved on. I don't think they moved on. I think they just got promoted to a different part of the line. The final siren sounds, signaling the end of the shift. But for those who have seen what lurks in the empty buildings, the night never truly ends. It follows them home, in the shadows they see from the corner of their eye, and in the silence of their own homes that now feels different. If you survive the night shift with us, make sure you're subscribed to Shadow Vault Stories. There are always more vaults to open. Until next time, when you hear a strange noise in the quiet, tell yourself it's just the building settling. But never, ever go to investigate it alone.